With Plan B emergency contraception, we're in control of our future. It's backup birth control you take after unprotected sex that helps prevent pregnancy before it starts. It works by temporarily delaying ovulation, and it won't impact your future fertility. Plan B is available in all 50 U.S. states at all major retailers near you, with no ID, prescription, or age requirement needed. Together, we've got this. Follow Plan B on Insta at Plan B One Step to learn more. Use as directed.
This week I'm talking about self-awareness. In this episode, you'll find out what self-awareness is, why it matters, and, most importantly, how to become more self-aware every day. So, let's talk. This is Let's Talk About Mental Health, a weekly podcast full of simple ideas for better mental health. I'm your host, Jeremy Godwin, and I'm an Australian writer and speaker who spent most of the 2010s dealing with severe depression and anxiety, and that led me to change careers to study mental health. In this show, I use my knowledge of psychology, sociology, and counselling, combined with my personal experiences of dealing with mental illness, to bring you a show full of ways to improve your mental well-being, one step at a time. Each week, I look at one specific topic and go through simple things you can do to improve your mental health. So, get comfortable and let's talk about mental health. Because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. Hello and welcome to episode 62, and thanks so much for joining me. Continuing on from last week's episode, this year is the year of well-being here on Let's Talk About Mental Health. Because well-being doesn't just happen, it takes work. So each week on the podcast in 2021, I'll be continuing to share simple ideas for improving your mental health and well-being by exploring lots of different things that you can do every day to make a positive difference in your life. This week is all about getting to know yourself and developing your self-awareness, because understanding who you are and how that influences every aspect of your life, including your feelings and your overall health, is a massive part of well-being. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a quick 30 seconds or so to say that this episode goes out on January the 18th, which means that we are now just a few days away from the launch of Let's Talk About Mental Health TV. It's been a bit of a rollercoaster of emotions getting ready for this. Excitement, fear, mild confusion, and honestly, I cannot wait to share this new content with all of you. You can find Let's Talk About Mental Health TV on YouTube. However, the easiest way is to head over to letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au/YouTube, where you'll find information, embedded videos, plus the channel link to subscribe. And a hot tip here, if you watch the trailer, then you can just click on the Let's Talk About Mental Health logo at the end of that video to subscribe. I hope you'll join me on January the 21st or January the 20th, depending on where you are in the world, so that we can talk some more about mental health. So now, on with this week's episode about self-awareness. I believe that it was the group of 5 philosophers collectively known as the Spice Girls who once said, "Swing it, shake it, move it, make it, who do you think you are?" And while I'm not entirely sure what we might be swinging, shaking, moving, or indeed making in this particular context, that question, who do you think you are, is one that we should all be asking ourselves on a regular basis. In my case, part of the answer is clearly that I'm someone who will find any excuse to quote the Spice Girls. So, who are you? Who are you really? It's a question that I posed all the way back in episode 30, Identity. And I'm revisiting it here because self-knowledge is the foundation of well-being. I won't be repeating the identity stuff that I talked about in that episode, like what you stand for and what you want out of life. So I encourage you to check that one out for more on that subject. But instead, what I'll be looking at today is how having a deep understanding of who you really are, even the stuff that hides away in dark corners of your mind, and accepting all of that is the first step in enabling you to improve your well-being. And like I said, this is the year of well-being here on Let's Talk About Mental Health. And it's also the first and I think most important step in being the very best version of yourself possible. So what is self-awareness? Well, let's explore some definitions. Self-awareness is about being consciously aware of who you are, your character, feelings, and values, along with what drives and motivates you. I mean, it pretty much is what it says on the tin. Self-awareness is about being fully aware of yourself. In a minute, I'll explain why that matters, but first, let's dig a little bit deeper into some of these definitions. According to an article by Inner Melbourne Clinical Psychology, which I'll put in the transcript, and I quote, "Self-awareness is a form of stepping back and observing your thoughts and feelings as they unfold. It can be as simple as noticing the emotions that you feel when you spend time with certain people, or the thoughts that run through your head when you feel scared about trying something new. Or it can be a more complex awareness of how your thoughts feed into your emotions, physical sensations, and behaviours. Put simply, self-awareness is shining a light on your thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and urges. Awareness of these aspects of yourself is the first step to change and growth. After all, you cannot change what you don't know about." And as I said, the link for that is in the transcript. Now, continuing on, there's an excellent article by an organizational psychologist which was in the Harvard Business Review, and again, I'll link to it in the transcript. It's from 2018. And in that article, they talk about two types of self-awareness: internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. So let me explain those, and I'll quote from that article. There are two broad categories of self-awareness. The first is internal self-awareness, which represents how clearly we see our own values, passions, aspirations fit with our environment, reactions, including thoughts, feelings, behaviours, strengths and weaknesses, and our impact on others. The second category, external self-awareness, means understanding how other people view us in terms of those same factors listed above. And the link for that article is in the transcript. Now, I think at some point in a past episode I've shared the ancient Greek saying, "Know thyself." Just don't ask me which one because I've lost track at this point. And that saying dates back thousands of years. It was known to be inscribed on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, and it can also be found in the works of great philosophers like Socrates and Plato. Now, you might be wondering what I'm doing talking about ancient philosophy in a podcast about mental health, and fair question. But at its core, philosophy is about studying the nature of our existence. In other words, it's about seeking answers to the questions, who am I? And what's the meaning of life? Questions which are absolutely fundamental to your overall well-being. So those two simple words, know thyself, when put together, become the most complicated and challenging aspect of human existence. Because to truly know yourself takes time, takes work, and above all else, takes real courage. Sometimes the answers we find about who we are might not be the ones we would hope for, but the whole point of working on your self-awareness and seeking to truly understand every aspect of who you are and who you are not is about helping you to identify where you are today and why, so that you can then make choices which help you to be the best version of yourself possible every day. The other day, Facebook did one of those notifications where it shows you posts from this day however many years ago, and I had a series of them come up from over a decade ago. I know, impossible, considering that I'm so young, but anyway. So it came up from a night where a group of us had gone out for dinner and drinks. Now, this was just a couple of years before my breakdown and deep into my phase of using alcohol to mask all of my pain, as well as a means of giving me the confidence to be what I thought was the life of the party. Now, one of the semi-drunken posts included me thinking that it was very funny that we'd been there for just half an hour and I'd already had several drinks, made inappropriate comments as though I were in some kind of reboot of The Benny Hill Show, and then also insulted a friend twice, supposedly as a joke. My apologies, Dana, for always ripping on you and thinking it was funny because it really wasn't. Anyway, when I read those posts from that night, which became worse and worse as the night wore on, I first felt a bit embarrassed, and then I began to feel nothing but empathy and love for that person who back then was still so socially awkward that he thought the only way to have fun was to get completely hammered and make an idiot of himself. And I know now how much pain he was in and how much he was hiding from. And I know how much potential he had if he could just find a way to be completely honest with himself so that he could then be true to himself. Now, I share that story because I find it interesting that we each have all of these different versions of ourselves that we were and that we could be. And the only thing that's stopping us from finding which one is the most authentic version of ourselves and living that so that we can then be the best version of ourselves possible is our self-awareness and our choice. And so with that in mind, why is self-awareness important for your mental health and well-being? It's important because if we just go through life without choosing to question our motivation in terms of the things that we do and say and whether or not our actions are contributing to us being the best version of ourselves possible, then that lack of self-insight can lead us to do things that take us away from finding and maintaining genuine well-being. Being the best you that you can possibly be isn't just internal or external, it's both. It's about being someone who does no harm to yourself or to others, someone who is kind to yourself and to others, and being someone who gives more than you take from yourself and from others. That stuff is tough, and it takes real work every single day, and making the choice to look at our actions so that we can consider whether they're healthy or unhealthy. For example, if we use drugs or alcohol or both to mask our pain, then what we're doing is the opposite of self-awareness. It's self-denial. And denial, apart from being a river in Egypt, can do real and long-lasting damage. When you deny your truth, you deny yourself the ability to be that very best version of yourself that you can possibly be. And that usually leads to heartache, pain, and misery. So then why does self-awareness matter so much? Because in order to be the best you need to truly understand who you really are. The good, the bad, and the ugly. No self-deception, no delusion, and no excuses. Just the truth. Only once you become fully aware of that truth can you hope to be able to take the next steps in your journey towards well-being and true growth. Now let me just spend a moment on that growth thing for a minute. I think I might have shared in previous episodes that my partner likes to garden, if I haven't anyway, whereas I have trouble keeping anything that's green from turning into a dried out corpse, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, the thing with gardening is that if you want it to work, then you need to do some work. You need to work out what your conditions are, your soil, your sunlight situation, your exposure to people like me who will inadvertently kill anything tree-like in nature, and then you need to make adjustments for those conditions. In other words, instead of just hoping for the best or ignoring your situation, you need to be completely honest about what your reality is and then go from there in terms of making adjustments where you can to optimize your situation. You either accept things as they are and deal with that, or you put in the hard yards to make changes. Building better soil, trimming surrounding trees to bring in more sunlight, etc. Whatever you need to do. Keeping me away from them also helps. Either way, you adjust, but you start by being fully aware of the truth. That's what self-awareness is, and that's why it matters. It's like when you take a trip somewhere new. If you want to get to a specific destination, you don't just jump in the car and hope that you'll make it there somehow. You need to begin by finding where you are on the map. I mean, okay, fine, GPS does that for you. But then once you know where you are, you can then work out how to get to where you want to be. Self-awareness is like that little arrow-shaped button in the Maps app which shows you where you are now. You cannot hope to figure out a course towards wherever it is that you want to go unless you know exactly where you are and how you got there in the first place so that you don't retrace those steps. Now, I mentioned an article from Harvard Business Review earlier, and I just want to share a short paragraph from it which I think explains some of the benefits of greater self-awareness and why it's so important. So the paragraph is, "We've found that internal self-awareness is associated with higher job and relationship satisfaction, personal and social control, and happiness. It is negatively related to anxiety, stress, and depression." So in other words, it actually helps to reduce those factors. In terms of external self-awareness, our research shows that people who know how others see them are more skilled at showing empathy and taking others' perspectives. And again, the link for that is in the transcript. The main message here is that truly knowing all of yourself gives you the chance to improve your well-being, not just internally, but also in terms of your relationships with other people and the wider world, which all leads to greater satisfaction and fulfillment. So how do you do that? How do you become more self-aware? Well, let's jump into the how-to part of this week's episode, how to build greater self-awareness. So there are lots of different things that you can do to increase your self-awareness, and some of these are things that I've explored in their own episodes already. So where that's the case, I'll do a quick overview and then I'll let you know which episode you can check out if you'd like to dive further into that suggestion. You can find audio and full transcripts for every episode for free at letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au/episodes. So the biggest one I want to start with is making time for deep and honest reflection. I talk about reflection practically all the time on this show, and usually somewhere in most episodes I'll bring it up, because it's about sitting down and really having a set of honest, objective and judgment-free conversations with yourself about who you are, where you are, how you got there, where you're heading, and what needs to change to get there. I did a whole episode on it back in episode 12, which was at the end of 2019. So check that out for a structured approach to reflecting. But whatever you do, it's important to begin by being honest about where you are today. It's that whole map and journey thing that I talked about earlier, where you need to know where you are before you can hope to plan where you're going. Part of that piece involves being honest with yourself about your mindset. Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Are you naturally positive, or do you tend to default to the negative? Now, there's no right or wrong. However, research has shown that people who tend to be more negative and pessimistic often have lower life satisfaction than those who are more positive and realistically optimistic. I covered mindset in episode 31 and optimism in episode 47, so check those out for more about those topics. The next piece is that you can build greater self-awareness by observing your emotions and seeking to understand them instead of just reacting to them. I talked about this a lot in episode 57, and the thing here is that when you just react to your emotions, then it can feel like you have no control. But you do, and you always do. You cannot control external events or people, but you can absolutely control what you do and say, as well as what you choose to do with your feelings. When you pause and consider what you're feeling, and then seek to understand why you're feeling that, to get to the root cause instead of just going with the emotions, you begin to better understand yourself. For example, I know that until I've had my 4 coffees each morning, I am not the most approachable person in the world, so please consider that fair warning if you ever see me out and about in the morning. Now, I could just blame the coffee for that, which is an external factor, but the reality is that this is something that's more internal. I need time to wake up and ease myself into the day before I can face the world. And the coffee is just a symptom rather than the actual root cause. Hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, the point here is don't just react. Instead, think about what is really going on, and then you can respond in a much more thoughtful way. Next, be clear about who you are and what you want out of life. Because this is what will guide you, and hopefully it should inform the decisions that you make. Part of that involves recognizing that you can learn just as much about yourself by exploring what you don't want out of life as what you do want. This is that whole piece that I talked about before from the Delphic Oracle, which is know thyself. And it's something that takes time, regular effort, and perseverance. But really start to think about who you are and what you want out of life, as well as what you don't want out of life. One way that you can do that is through regular mindfulness practice, which was the subject of its own episode back in episode 42. You don't need to hike to a mountaintop or consult a guru in order to be mindful. Just take a few minutes each day to pause and quietly absorb your surroundings. Gently noticing every detail and experiencing the present entirely. If your mind drifts or random thoughts pop up, notice them and let them go without judgment. And then just return your focus to the present moment. So what this type of practice does is it helps to ground you in the present much more fully, since we often spend so much time ruminating over the past or worrying about the future. Being self-aware means being able to focus on the present fully, because this moment is where you live, not in the past, which has passed and cannot be changed, only learned from, and certainly not in the future, which is unwritten and which will be determined by what you do here and now. A few minutes of simple mindfulness practice every day can make an enormous difference in terms of grounding you in the present and helping you to know yourself. Another thing that does that, and which works well for building greater self-awareness, is journaling. Now, putting your thoughts down on paper can help to get them out of your mind, and I don't know about you, but I'm a venter. When I'm feeling some type of way, I find that most of the time just getting it out, venting, whether that's on paper or talking to someone, just makes the world of difference. And the important thing here is that when you are journaling, be objective and non-judgmental about what you're writing. I talk all the time about being kind, and that means being kind to others as well as being kind to yourself. A few minutes a day spent jotting down your thoughts can help you to get to know yourself better. You may also find daily gratitude practice to be helpful. I covered that in its own episode back in episode 46. And by identifying what you're grateful for, you can get a much better idea of what really matters to you in life, just as you can by spending time thinking about your priorities, which was the subject of episode 3. And then moving on, next, I want to encourage you to explore different perspectives rather than only focusing on your own. And that might sound funny in a podcast talking about self-awareness in terms of recommending that you become more aware of others and other people's perspectives. And the reason for that is that I think that there is a bit of a tendency to focus on ourselves. And certainly that's the case in Western countries like Australia, if we're being really honest. And the thing is that while you may not agree with other people, that doesn't mean that they don't have something to teach you, even if that thing that they can teach you is what not to do in order to be a decent human being. Discover new ideas, new ways of thinking, new perspectives, ask questions, and learn about the broader world, not just your little corner of it. There are over 8 billion of us spread out across this planet, and we're all unique. And I'm sorry to have to break this to you, but your way of living and doing things is not the only way, and it may not even be the best way. So, be curious about the external world beyond your little bubble, and you'll find that you begin to become much more self-aware of your own opportunities to grow as a result of what you discover. And to paraphrase a well-known quote, if you always think what you always thought, then you'll always get what you always got. And staying the same is stagnation, not growth. If you want to be the best version of yourself possible, you need to grow. And in order to grow, you need to expand your mind and become even more self-aware. If that's something that you're struggling with, get support. A good counsellor or therapist can work with you to explore all of this stuff objectively and will hopefully challenge you to look at things from different perspectives. And then beyond that, my final point is to always remember that the Spice Girls encouraged us to ponder not only who we think we are, but also to trust it, use it, prove it, and groove it. And then show how good you are. I don't know how I just did that with a straight face, but here we are. Because when it comes to self-awareness and mental health, what it all boils down to is this. Getting to know yourself and being completely honest about who you are and who you are not can be a real challenge for many of us, especially since we're taught by society from an early age to do whatever we need to do to fit in. And so it can take a lot of work to dig through all of those layers of conditioning that have built up over the years to then get to the truth of who you really are as an individual. But in doing so, we allow ourselves the opportunity to become the very best version of ourselves possible. Someone who is authentic, kind, and giving. Someone who makes the most of every moment of this gift that we call life. You are unique, and there will never be anybody like you. And so getting to know yourself and understanding who you truly are and living that allows you to become whatever it is that you need to be. The choice is yours, as it is with all things related to your well-being. So, what choice will you make today? Each week, I like to finish up by sharing a quote about the week's topic, and I encourage you to take a few moments to really reflect on it and consider what it means to you. This week's quote is by the Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke, and it is, "There is only one journey, going inside yourself." Let me repeat that. There is only one journey, going inside yourself. All right, that's nearly it for this week. Next week, I'll be talking about simplicity. I've mentioned quite a few times in past episodes that one of the things that can have a big impact on our well-being is our ability to focus on simplicity over complexity. Because the more complex things are in life, the higher the likelihood that challenges will occur. And so next week, I'll be discussing what simplicity is in relation to well-being, why it matters, and how to incorporate greater simplicity into your life every day to improve your overall well-being. I hope you'll join me for that episode, which will be released in the morning of Monday the 25th of January in the Asia-Pacific region, including Australia, the evening of Sunday the 24th of January in the UK, Ireland, Europe, Africa and the Middle East, and the afternoon of Sunday the 24th of January in the US, Canada, Central America and South America. And of course, join me for the launch of Let's Talk About Mental Health TV on January the 21st in Australia and the Asia-Pacific region, and January the 20th in the rest of the world, including the US, UK, Canada, etc. You can head to letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au for links to the YouTube channel, along with past episodes, including audio links and full transcripts. And while you're there, join the Let's Talk About Mental Health mailing list to have exclusive updates land in your inbox. Those of you on my email list find out about stuff at least a week before anybody else. So if you like this show, sign up at the website, letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. You can also find Let's Talk About Mental Health on Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook at LTA Mental Health, where I post extra content throughout the week. Thank you very much for joining me today. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out into the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time.